I'm 80 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my best friend of 57 years died. I wish I could tell you this calmly. I can't. Because the truth is, I didn't cry at his funeral the way everyone expected me to. Not at first. I stood there, hands folded, listening to the pastor say kind, tidy words about a life that was anything but tidy, and all I could think was this: I waited too long. You see, people think regret comes from the big mistakes, affairs, addictions, betrayals. That's not what broke me. What broke me was something smaller, quieter, something that felt harmless at the time. My friend's name was Daniel. We met when I was 23 and he was 22. We built our lives side by side: marriages, kids, mortgages, promotions, disappointments. We used to joke that one of us would speak at the other's funeral. Turns out, neither of us did, because there are words you assume you'll always have time to say. I'm telling you this now because the night before Daniel died, my phone rang. I saw his name, and I let it ring. I told myself I'd call back tomorrow. I told myself it wasn't urgent. I told myself the same lie I'd been telling for years. And what happened after that? What I realized standing over his coffin changed the way I understand friendship, time, and love itself. If you have someone in your life you've been meaning to call, if you think you'll get around to it someday, please listen to me, because I'm 80 years old, and I'm carrying a lesson that came at the highest possible price. And I need to tell you this before it's too late for you too. Before I tell you about the mistake, you need to understand the life we were living before it happened. Daniel and I weren't dramatic men. We didn't sit around talking about feelings or regrets. We were builders, schedulers, providers. Men who believed that showing up meant paying bills on time and fixing things when they broke. We met in 1968 at a manufacturing plant just outside of town. First day on the job. I was nervous, trying not to show it. Daniel leaned over during orientation and whispered, "If this place kills us, at least we'll die bored together." That was Daniel. Dry humor, disarming, instantly familiar. By the time we were 30, we were both married. By 35, we each had 2 kids. By 40, we were coaching Little League on the same dusty field every Saturday morning. We didn't plan it that way. Life just aligned us. We lived 14 minutes apart. I know because I drove it every Sunday for nearly 20 years. Sunday barbecues, paper plates, lukewarm beer, or wives trading recipes they never followed, kids running barefoot until sunset. Those years felt endless. That's important, because when time feels endless, you treat it carelessly. In our 40s and 50s, responsibilities piled up. Daniel moved into management. I started my own small contracting business. We talked less, but we didn't worry about it. We told ourselves the same thing everyone does. This is just a busy season. Funny how busy seasons can last decades. Still, there were rituals. A call on birthdays, a quick check-in after surgeries. A standing rule that if one of us ever needed help at 2 a.m., the other wouldn't ask questions. We mistook consistency for closeness. By the time we hit our 60s, the cracks started to show, not in the friendship, but in our bodies. Daniel had high blood pressure. I had a bad hip. We joked about pill organizers and early bedtimes. We joked because joking was safer than admitting fear. We saw each other mostly at milestones after that. Weddings, funerals, retirement parties. Every time we met, we said the same thing: let's not wait so long next time. And every time we did. Here's the part that matters. Around 5 years ago, Daniel started calling me more often. Not long conversations, just short calls. 2 minutes, sometimes less. He'd ask how I was. I'd tell him I was busy. He'd laugh and say, "Yeah, me too." I didn't hear what was underneath those calls. I thought friendship was something that could sit quietly in the background and survive on shared history alone. I thought that because we'd been through everything together, we didn't need maintenance. That assumption felt reasonable. It felt earned. But life doesn't care how long you've known someone. Daniel's wife passed away 3 years before he did. I sent flowers. I attended the service. I hugged him and told him, "If you need anything, I'm here." I meant it, but I didn't change my behavior. I didn't call more often. I didn't stop by unannounced. I didn't sit with him in the quiet moments where grief actually lives. I assumed he had his kids, his routines, his strength. I assumed wrong. The last year of his life, his calls became more frequent. Sometimes he'd leave voicemails, nothing urgent. Just, "Hey, thought I'd check in." Sometimes I listen later and forget to respond. I told myself there would be another call. There's always another call, until there isn't. What I didn't know, what I couldn't see yet, was that those short conversations were his way of reaching out without asking for help. They were invitations, quiet ones. And the moment I finally understood that was the moment I realized how badly I had misunderstood what friendship really asks of us. But what happened next, what happened on that final phone call, forced me to confront a truth I can't unlearn. The last time Daniel called me was on a Tuesday night at 8:47 p.m. I remember the time because I was sitting in my chair, the one by the window, watching the evening news with the sound turned low. My phone buzzed on the side table. I glanced down and saw his name. Daniel. No urgency. No warning bells. Just a familiar name on a familiar screen. I let it ring. I wish I could tell you there was a good reason. There wasn't. I wasn't in a meeting. I wasn't sick. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was comfortable. I told myself, I'll call him back tomorrow morning. He's probably just checking in. That tomorrow never came. The next morning, at 6:12 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Daniel. It was his daughter. Her voice was steady in that practiced way people get when they've already cried too much. She said my name, then paused, then said, "Dad passed away in his sleep." I remember thanking her. Can you believe that? Thanking her. As if she'd just given me directions or returned a favor. Shock makes you polite in strange ways. After I hung up, I sat there staring at the phone. The same phone I hadn't answered just hours earlier. That's when I saw it. The missed call notification. One call from Daniel, the night before he died. I listened to the voicemail. It was only 18 seconds long. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Just wanted to hear your voice. Call me when you get a chance." That was it. No drama, no goodbye, no hint that his heart was about to give out while he slept. Just a man who didn't want to feel alone that night. At the funeral, people shared stories about Daniel's generosity, his humor, his reliability. All of it was true, and every compliment felt like another weight pressing down on my chest, because I realized something standing there that I had never admitted before. I had confused history with presence. I thought that because we'd shared 57 years, I didn't need to show up in the small moments anymore. I thought our bond was self-sustaining, automatic, permanent. But friendship doesn't work like that. The moment that broke me didn't happen at the graveside. It happened later, alone in my car, when I scrolled through our call history. Missed calls, short conversations, long gaps, patterns. I'd ignored because they didn't scream for attention. That's when it hit me, the realization that changed everything. Daniel wasn't calling to chat, he was calling to connect, and I was responding with convenience instead of care. Here's the part that's hardest to admit. If Daniel had called me 10 years earlier, I would have answered without thinking. If he'd called during a crisis, I would have rushed over. But because his need was quiet, because it didn't interrupt my schedule, I treated it as optional. That's the mistake. We're trained to respond to emergencies, not to loneliness. We show up for accidents, not for absence. We rush toward flames but ignore the slow leak of isolation. After the funeral, I couldn't sleep. Every quiet moment replayed that ringing phone. I started noticing something uncomfortable. Daniel wasn't the only one I'd been postponing. There were other names, other messages, other "I'll get back to them later" moments. And that scared me, because if I could miss something this important with the person closest to me for half a century, what else was I missing? That's when I understood the true cost of waiting. Not the dramatic kind, the subtle kind, the kind that accumulates quietly until one day it presents you with a bill you can't pay. Daniel's death didn't just end his life. It exposed a blind spot in mine, and once you see that blind spot, you can't unsee it. What I learned from that moment, what I wish someone had forced me to understand sooner, is something I now feel obligated to pass on. Because this lesson isn't about death. It's about how we live and who we choose to show up for while we still can. After Daniel died, I started paying attention to the quiet spaces in my life. Not the loud ones, not the obvious ones. The quiet spaces, the pauses between calls, the unread messages, the moments when I thought about someone and did nothing. That's where regret lives. Not in what we did wrong, but in what we didn't do at all. For most of my life, I believed relationships were built by big moments. Weddings, births, emergencies, milestones you could circle on a calendar. But losing Daniel taught me something painfully simple. Relationships are maintained by small, unremarkable acts of presence. A returned call, a short visit, a "how are you really?" We underestimate these because they don't feel heroic. They don't give us stories to tell at parties. But they are the difference between someone feeling remembered and someone feeling alone. Here's a metaphor I wish I'd understood earlier. Friendship is not a bridge you cross once and assume will hold forever. It's a road, and roads don't collapse all at once. They erode slowly, invisibly, one unmaintained crack at a time. By the time you notice the damage, it's often too late to drive across. When you're young, time feels like a savings account you can withdraw from endlessly. You assume tomorrow is guaranteed. When you're my age, time feels more like loose change in your pocket. You hear it jingle, and you're suddenly aware that there isn't much left. That shift changes everything. To those of you in your 20s and 30s, let me say this gently. The people in your life right now will not always be accessible. Schedules will fill, priorities will shift, parents will age, friends will disappear into responsibilities. If you don't build the habit of presence early, distance becomes the default. To those in your 40s and 50s, you're in the most dangerous phase. You're competent, relied upon, busy. You are needed everywhere, and because of that, you start rationing your attention. Be careful what you cut. The things you postpone now are the ones you'll ache for later. And to those of you closer to my age, you already know. You know the names that come to mind when the house is quiet. You know the calls you wish you'd returned. You know the chairs that are empty. Daniel taught me that loneliness doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as independence. As I don't want to bother anyone, as they're probably busy. When someone reaches out without a clear reason, that is the reason. Another truth I learned too late. People don't need your solutions nearly as much as they need your presence. I spent decades believing that being useful was the same as being there. Fix the problem, offer advice, help when asked. But Daniel didn't need me to fix anything that night. He just needed to hear a familiar voice, and I failed him. That failure sits with me, not as a punishment, but as a responsibility. Because regret, if you let it, can either harden you or educate you. I chose education. I now return calls the same day, even if it's just to say I can't talk long, but I wanted you to know I saw your name and it mattered. I visit people without an agenda. I say the things that feel obvious because obvious doesn't mean unnecessary. Love unexpressed is not love completed. We assume people know how we feel. We assume history speaks for itself. It doesn't. History fades, words don't. Daniel knew I cared, but knowing and feeling are not the same. If you remember nothing else from my story, remember this: time doesn't take things from us, we give them up by waiting. Every postponed call is a quiet decision. Every later is a gamble. Most of the time you get away with it, until one day you don't. That's not meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up, because the most meaningful changes don't come from dramatic resolutions. They come from small intentional acts repeated daily. And the truth is, you don't need more time. You need different priorities. What Daniel's death gave me at a cost I would never choose is clarity. And clarity demands action. Which brings me to the part of this story I wish someone had said directly to me years ago. If you're still listening to me, I want you to hear this clearly. Don't make my mistake. Not the dramatic version you're imagining, but the quiet one you're probably already making without realizing it. The mistake isn't cruelty. It isn't neglect in the obvious sense. It's delay. Delay wrapped in good intentions. Delay disguised as responsibility. Delay justified by the belief that strong relationships don't require constant attention. They do. I'm not asking you to overhaul your life or become someone you're not. I'm asking you to do something much simpler and much harder. When a name appears on your phone and you feel a small hesitation before answering, pay attention to that moment. That hesitation is not inconvenience. It's information. It's telling you that this person matters more than your comfort right now. Call them back today, not tomorrow, not when things slow down. They won't. Sit with them without trying to fix anything. Let silence exist. Let presence be enough. Here's the uncomfortable truth. One day there will be a last call, a last message, a last opportunity to hear a voice you once took for granted. You will not recognize it when it happens. That's why every interaction deserves your full attention. Not because it's special, but because it might be final. I visit Daniel's grave once a month. I talk to him there, not because I believe he can hear me, but because I need to hear myself say the things I should have said earlier. I'm here. You matter to me. I should have called back. If I could trade every lesson I learned from his death to have answered that phone, I would do it without hesitation. But we don't get to rewrite our past. We only get to interrupt our patterns. So interrupt yours. After this video ends, think of one person, just one you've been postponing. Someone whose name brings a mix of warmth and guilt. That's the person. Reach out. Say something ordinary. Ordinary is enough. I'm 80 years old. I don't have many decades left to practice this lesson. But you might. That's why I'm giving it to you now. Not as advice from a stranger, as a warning from someone who waited too long. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it pass without action. Reflection without movement turns into regret. And if you want to stay reminded of what truly matters, of the lessons time teaches us too late, then stay with me here. Subscribe. Like this video. Share it with someone you care about. Not for me, for the call you haven't answered yet, because one day silence will answer for you.